Hello, and welcome to my presentation for NURS 624 Teaching in Health Disciplines. My name is David Mazerl. I'm a Master's of Nursing student studying at Athabasca University, and although this presentation is part of my coursework, it's my hope that it can be used as a resource for students and teachers that are interested in implementing flipped classroom teaching into their practice. This is the presentation overview. In order to discuss the practical applications of flipped classroom teaching in undergraduate nursing education, it is important to discuss the use of technology in teaching and the unique facets of nursing education. I will proceed to explore an operational definition of the flipped classroom, including theoretical and design considerations for educators. I will explore the use of flipped classroom teaching as it applies to nursing education through examining the strengths and weaknesses reported in current literature. Finally, I will conclude this presentation with some practical resources that educators can use. I have also created a pamphlet that summarizes this presentation with links to my electronic portfolio, should anybody want to have a copy. Are you ready? Let's get started. When we discuss technology and its place in healthcare and education, we must recognize the rapid growth and integration of new technology into nursing practice. This growth and integration are changing the ways that educators teach and students learn. Access to information is instant and reflects all aspects of healthcare, most notably in the clinical practice environment. Technology facilitates the giving and receiving of feedback for both teachers and learners, accelerating the frequency and the amount of feedback that transpires between teachers and students. The ability to send and receive feedback is a unique feature of the blended classroom instruction. Blended classroom teaching refers to the use of online or web-based technology in teaching and learning. An increase in blended classroom instruction was noted throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, as a result, teachers and students were forced to adapt to blended classroom instructional models, which arguably has permanently changed the way that people teach and learn. According to England, undergraduate nursing education is tasked with meeting the increasing needs of sicker patients entering the healthcare system. Given that people are living longer with chronic health conditions such as diabetes and heart disease, the new generation of graduate nurses entering the workforce must be fully prepared to respond to unpredictable patient care scenarios. Therefore, it is essential that undergraduate nursing education is targeted to the preparation of competent and skilled clinical practitioners. In order to facilitate critical thinking and decision-making skills in nursing students, teachers and educators must be equipped with teaching strategies that target learning outcomes and promote active learning, also known as student-led learning. Student-led learning presents learning that is driven by the learner's needs rather than the individual teaching preferences. One of these strategies has been proven to increase active student learning, and that is the flipped classroom. So, what is a flipped classroom? Flipped classroom represents a shift in traditional educational practices to a student-centered and student-led process. The student is at the center of the flipped classroom instructional method, taking control of his or her own learning. The Flipped Learning Network provides a comprehensive definition of flipped classroom instruction, stating that flipped classroom moves learning from the group to the individual learning space. In this way, learning does not begin in the physical class space within a group, but rather outside of the classroom before the class. The learner participates in pre-class learning activities, typically, which is a recorded lecture such as this, or online learning activity hosted by an online platform or approach. Instead of simply engaging in traditional in-class lectures after completing readings or homework, the use of pre-class lectures represents the flip in classroom instruction, which extends the presence of the classroom and maximizes in-class learning activities. The group space then becomes an active learning environment where the teacher or instructor provides guidance and facilitates learning within the classroom. Here we see a visual comparison of a traditional lecture-based classroom with the flipped classroom approach. In the lecture-based approach, students are given homework or reading material before the class. Students are expected to process large amounts of information that is often repeated in the class lectures. The students then attend the lecture in which the teacher uses this time to introduce new concepts. Students are then asked to complete homework after the class with less opportunity for collaboration with teachers and classmates. In the flipped classroom approach, students are introduced to content prior to the class using pre-class activities that typically use online or personalized videos. These videos can be a pre-recorded lecture combined with study questions to be completed at the learner's own pace. Students arrive at the class with the foundational knowledge to participate in higher order learning activities such as case studies and in-class presentations with classmates. The teacher is present to guide students as they clarify concepts learned from the in-class phase. Formative or summative assignments such as quizzes or short writing papers can also be used at the beginning of class, providing opportunities for learners to apply their new knowledge. Having knowledge of classroom content prior to class allows for maximum efficiency and utilization of in-class resources that engage in new learning. The in-class phase is characterized by clarifying concepts and learning and extending learning opportunities through activities that enhance learning and knowledge acquisition. In-class activities can also include quizzes and reflective exercises that promote communication. Now we will discuss the theories that are important to flipped classroom teaching. It has been argued that flipped classroom teaching and learning are rooted in the constructivist or social constructivism theory. With the constructivist learning theory, learning is understood through the building of new knowledge from previous experiences and learning. The term scaffolding has also been used by Melrose et al. To describe how the learner builds new knowledge from existing or previous knowledge. Considering the use of case studies used in flipped classroom teaching, students use knowledge from the pre-class activities in class, thereby building on what was learned prior to the case study. Furthermore, Chen et al. Noted that a constructivist learning theory best described how students build confidence. Also, independence and self-direction from knowledge previously gained outside of the physical classroom space. When applying concepts of Bloom's taxonomy to the flipped classroom in the traditional lecture-based teaching approaches, the flipped learning network makes an important distinction between the two teaching approaches. Because traditional lecture-based teaching spends most of the in-class portion on delivering lectures, students spend more time developing a foundational knowledge base and trying to understand the concepts that are taught to them in the middle of class. This in turn decreases the opportunity for student and teacher collaboration, which decreases the amount of time to engage in higher order thinking. Because students have already acquired foundational knowledge in the pre-class phase, they can spend more time analyzing, applying, and synthesizing new concepts. Not only are students engaged in their learning, but they have more opportunities to apply their knowledge in the class. Now, we will discuss how flipped classroom can be designed for use in undergraduate nursing education. The ADDIE tool is a useful tool for creating new educational systems and activities. It considers important aspects of teaching and learning when considering flipped classroom teaching. The ADDIE acronym stands for Analyze, Design, Develop, Implement, Evaluate. In the Analyze phase, as an educator, I want to ask myself, what am I teaching? And is this flipped classroom approach appropriate? This represents the pre-planning phase, and it's essential that educators and teachers have a good understanding of the desired outcomes that are typically specified in a course syllabus or program model. Next, we enter the design phase, and this is the planning phase. Some important questions to consider here: how am I going to deliver the flipped classroom? Am I going to use a specific platform to host the lessons plan, or will the flipped classroom be a lecture video format, audio podcast, or it could be a combination of both? In the development, this is where I should decide what content to put in. Perhaps I'm planning to teach students how to perform a nursing skill, such as urinary catheterization. What materials should be created for this lesson? In the implementation phase, I'm delivering the flipped classroom lesson. The focus is on facilitating the class and responding to the learning needs of the students. In the evaluation, this is the final stage, and I really want to measure the success of my flipped classroom teaching. This can be done through formative or summative evaluation strategies. Perhaps I could administer a post-test to explore how well students met learning outcomes after that class and ask to have students complete a survey. The 9 design principles of flipped classroom learning were originally conceived by Lee and Park in 2018, and they still hold relevancy as a framework for planning flipped classroom activities. Using the 9 principles, I can ensure that I have developed a comprehensive flipped classroom lesson plan. Number 1, I create an incentive for student preparation and participation. This ensures that I must engage my learners and ensure that they want to take part in this activity. Therefore, I might ensure that there is some grade attached to the activity, even if it is only for bonus points. Next, I want to find a strategy to assess student learning. A question that is pertinent to my activity here is, how will I assess the student learning? Will it be through conventional assignments, in-class presentations, reflection, and so forth? The benefit of flipped classroom teaching is that there is sufficient time for in-class work and participation. I can spend time with individual students or groups and guide them in their work, and I can give them timely feedback on their work. Number 4 is to provide a sufficient amount of time for student and group work. As noted, the flipped classroom allows me to tailor my time in class to the needs of the students' learning and activities. Number 5 is encourage communication and inspire a learning community. This should be reflected through my in-class activities. I want to choose activities that inspire the students to participate and facilitate their collaborative learning. Adopting technologies that are accessible is a consideration that might be overlooked sometimes when developing flipped classroom activities. For example, some students might live in rural areas or have poor access to internet service. The same could be said for a smaller learning center. Also, I want to use an online platform that isn't difficult to navigate for myself and my students. I'll discuss some useful resources and platforms at the end of this presentation. And number 7, I'm ensuring the students are engaged in that learning activity prior to class. This is an important aspect and highlights the importance of developing relevant and interesting pre-class content. Therefore, I should spend a good amount of time preparing for the class and seeking feedback from my students. Connecting learning and knowledge inside and out of class is particularly important for nursing. As I discussed at the beginning of the presentation, nursing requires special skill sets that must translate from the classroom to practice. Therefore, my teaching should have practical application for my students. Number 9 is plan for ongoing support and guidance. This principle is directed at me as a teacher. I want to ensure that I'm engaging in reflective practice and ensuring that my approach stays current and relevant. The 4 pillars of FLIP were designed by the Flip Learning Network in 2014 and also describe some of the aspects of flip learning that are important to incorporate into the activities. In the flexible environment, we want to provide adequate space and time for learning. We want to adjust the environment based on student needs and provide options for students to learn and apply knowledge. In consideration of learning culture, we want to make it student-centered. That means that the teacher does not always have to be involved. We can focus it on group work and accessible learning that builds upon previous knowledge, such as scaffolding approach. Intentional content means that the instruction is accessible and highlights key concepts in learning material. Content is created with consideration of student learning and needs. Create variability in content that is accessible for all the students. And professional educator refers to the teacher and how the teacher plays a pivotal role in the success or failure of the flipped classroom approaches. By being available to students and the class and providing feedback as needed, there's ongoing formative assessments which provide ongoing evaluation of student learning. As well, students take responsibility for professional development and they collaborate with each other and seek ways to improve. In this section, we will review current literature and research exploring the use of flipped classroom in undergraduate nursing education. There were numerous themes that emerged from current studies that related to flipped classroom teaching and the strengths that it has. Flipped classroom teaching can happen anywhere. It's very flexible and it can be in person and online. Flipped classroom teaching provides more time for collaborative practice. Monroe and Sacco found that flipped classroom as an active learning strategy stimulates the clinical environment using a collaborative process. Since the flipped classroom is part of the active learning classroom teaching strategy and includes group, collaborative, and situation-based learning, this provides increased opportunities for students to communicate, which is essential to nursing practice. Flipped classroom teaching positively contributes to cognitive, affective, and interpersonal learning outcomes because they engage active learners. Actively engaged learners have reported increased motivation and satisfaction in learning environments. Flipped classroom has also been linked to improved metacognitive processes, such as critical thinking and skills of analysis. This is essential for preparing nurses for the clinical practice environment. Some of the challenges to flipped classroom teaching in undergraduate nursing education are also identified in this presentation. For example, in a discussion about technology requirements and the need to be able to connect to internet activities to be able to conduct pre-class teaching. Time commitments were significant for both teacher and student at the beginning of the implementation in flipped classroom teaching. Flipped classroom teaching presented some difficulties as well for teachers transitioning from the traditional lecture-based classroom to the flipped class teaching. And of course, flipped classroom teaching is very dependent on student participation. As we've identified, there needs to be incentives for students and a full buy-in for them to be part of the flipped classroom. In conclusion, we can see that advances in technology can be used to meet the diverse and complex needs of undergraduate nursing education. The flipped classroom also expands that teaching and learning space beyond the physical realm. Theories and models such as constructivism and Bloom's taxonomy describe how flipped classroom contributes to higher level learning. Designing flipped classroom must consider macro and micro level factors at the outset, and we reviewed strategies such as the ADDIE approach and FLIP. Research suggested that flipped classroom has been an effective tool used in undergraduate nursing education, although there was also some challenges to its implementation. If you'd like some additional resources, I highly recommend the Flip Learning Network. This is a network for educator development and resources, and there's links to platforms and hosting sites with wonderful videos showing you how to do it, and it offers best practice strategies in flipped classroom teaching. Also, there's Edpuzzle, which is a platform for creating and hosting pre-class videos and content. As an educator, you can log in and create your own modules and videos for your students to engage in pre-class. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. Have a great day.